Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Community Outdoor Outreach Program, otherwise known as the Co-op Grant. I am Rena Beyer. What you're seeing on the screen now is our agenda. We are using a webinar, obviously a webinar platform to deliver this. There are resources available to you that we'll be using in this webinar. These include the program guidance, the sample application, and the TPWD approved partnership handouts. These were also sent to you in the confirmation after you signed up for this webinar. It was sent to you in an email. And these can also be found under the Resources tab in the Recreation Grants Online System, or ARGO. We'll be talking more about ARGO later. If you look at the control panel on your screen, you should be seeing a tab that called Handouts. That's where these are located. Please also note that your microphones are turned off, but you are able to ask questions at any time during the webinar by clicking on the Questions tab, which is also located on that control panel. I'm Rena Beyer. I am the manager for the Co-op Grant Program. I have been in this position for about a year, just a tiny little bit over a year. Before that, I was a park ranger for 3 years prior to that. My area of expertise really is in the outdoor recreation realm. I am certified in many of the things that you'll be including in your grant proposals. And before that, for over 35 years, I was in the grants field, including being a grant writer. I wrote primarily very competitive government grants. And I've been a grant evaluator for federal grants and grant manager, so pretty much have seen all the different pieces of a grant. I'm gonna, in a second, let you be introduced to Jessica, who is my partner. We are a two-person team here with the Co-op Grants. The first part of this grant workshop is talking about the guidance and eligibility. So I'm going to go over the program guidance in a pretty general way, and then we're going to have a little break. And then the second part of the workshop, we will be taking a deep dive into actually writing the grant application. And we also have a couple special guests for you today who are possibly those that you might be partnering with. So we'll talk about them a little bit later. And we also, as I mentioned, there is some time, anytime during this webinar, if you have questions, feel free to type those in, and we are here answering those as we go along. Jessica, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining our workshop today. My name is Jessica Lagallo. I'm a grant coordinator with the Co-op Grant Program. If you had a grant with us before, you might have had me as your grant coordinator, and I am here to help you write the most competitive grant application possible. I've been with our Co-op Grants team for a couple of years now, and prior to that, I worked in our outdoor education and outreach department with state parks. I've done lots of different types of conservation and environmental work. I was a public school teacher for 9 years. Also, I've worked at various summer camps and recreation programs, so hopefully that will help me support you to run your grant-funded programs. So again, thanks for being here today, and I'll chat more with you in the second half of today's workshop.
Thanks, Jessica. So the first half of today, we're going to be talking, primarily we're going to be using the program guidance. I hope you have a copy of that. If not, please be sure you get one at some point, because a lot of the things that pretty much everything you're going to need to know about the grant is in that program guidance, including after you get the award and you have questions, it's probably in the program guidance. I'm going to talk a little bit about the co-op, the purpose of the co-op grant, the history of it, who we fund, what we fund, so what kind of, what's eligible to be funded, what's not eligible to be funded, what's an allowable cost. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about how we fund, what happens once you submit your application to us. So the purpose of the co-op grant, the co-op grant is a TPWD Community Outdoor Outreach Program, or co-op grant. It provides funding to tax-exempt organizations for programming that engages underserved communities in outdoor recreation, conservation, and environmental education activities in partnership with Texas Parks and Wildlife sites, programs, and staff. The co-op grant initially was funded in 1996. A lot has changed in, which I'll talk about in the types of applications we get and the types of awards we offer. And I'll talk about that trend. What basically we're seeing is a lot more applications submitted. Last year we received a record number of applications, and we are actually funding fewer awards, but for higher amounts. So in 1996, the maximum award that you could apply for a co-op grant was about $5,000. Well, it was $5,000. That was the maximum you could apply for. I wasn't here then, but I suspect that probably 80 to 90% of the applications that were submitted were probably funded. And over the years, we steadily increased the maximum award. So, for example, in 2020, and we also increased the total amount of funding. We didn't increase that. The legislators actually made that decision. In 2020, we offered, we awarded $820,000. Those awards range from $5,000 to $30,000. So we increased that award amount to $30,000. That year, we received 48 applications, and we funded about 42% of those. 2025, last year, we awarded over 1.9 million grants, ranging from $5,000 to $100,000. That was the range that could be applied for. We received 83 applications and only funded about 34% of those. We only funded 28 applications because the programs asked for more money, so we were able to award fewer. So we're moving to this year's competition, the current competition. We are offering grants from $5,000 to $100,000. The co-op grant does not require a match. It is a reimbursement grant, however, and it's important to note that you must have enough funds on hand to start your program and then request for reimbursement, which can take about 30 days. This is a little change. It's a big change over what we've offered in the past. In the past, we've offered advance funds to allow you to start your program and then get reimbursed and then start the reimbursement process, but we are changing that. And so now it will be very rare to receive an advance. So you should plan on having those funds on hand and plan to get reimbursed. Moving to the timeline, so the applications were available as of August 1st. Those are also available on Argo. The application deadline is November 1st at 5:00 p.m. Central Standard Time, and please be aware that once 5 o'clock and 1 second happens, the Argo system will no longer allow you to submit your grant proposal. So be sure you submit those on time and give yourself lots of time in case something goes wrong during the submission process. We announced the awards on March 1st, 2026. There is a time period, this is important to note while you're thinking of what projects you're gonna do and when those will start. There's a grant agreement phase, we call it, from March 1st till about May 1st, and that's a minimum amount of time that we need to set up all the systems that we need to do in order to be able to be in a place to reimburse you. So that takes a little bit. So if you are planning on starting your grant activities in March over spring break right away, be aware of that because you won't be able to get reimbursed until we get all those systems set up. So you may want to think about that as you're planning your grant project. We do have a grant management webinar. If you're awarded a grant, we require that you attend this, and that will be sometime in late March. And then the award agreement period is March 1st, 2026. So you can actually start doing activities as soon as you get that announcement. And then that agreement period ends on September 1st, 2027. We do require quarterly reports that we take very seriously, and those, the first one will be due on July 30th, following your grant award. And then a final report will be due 45 days after the grant period ends. So now we're moving on to who we fund. We fund tax-exempt organizations, including political subdivisions and nonprofit organizations. If you are like every other person so far who has attended our workshops, you may not know what a political subdivision is. So I'll tell you. A political subdivision means a county, municipality, special district, river authority, or other governmental entity created under the authority of the state or a county or municipality. So again, we fund tax-exempt organizations, including nonprofit organizations with a 501c3 and political subdivisions. Talking a little bit about eligibility. So in order for your application to be reviewed, we need a few things. One of those is if you're a nonprofit organization, you must include with your application the IRS letter determining the tax exempt status. We also require a UEI number. This is how we determine that your organization is in good standing with the federal agencies and with the Texas Comptroller. We do not issue that UEI number, but we do require it. You don't have to be fully registered on grants.gov, on SAMS.gov, but you do need to get that UEI number. We would suggest you start that process right away because it does take a while sometimes. We do have a handout on that. We just made it for you. Again, we don't issue this, but the handout will detail on how to apply for that. That can be found on page 10 of the program guidance as well. The other pieces of the eligibility, you must have, if you've had a past grant, it must be closed, and you must not have received a grant in the last competitive cycle. We only allow one grant award per entity, and we require a signed resolution, which has a new piece of it this year, a new element. And this, I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about the resolution and what we require on that. So the resolution, and by the way, this can all be found on page 10 of the program guidance, so you don't have to memorize it. The resolution requires a signed copy. It needs to be signed. It must be dated no later than 1 year from the application submission date. It must certify, it must indicate that the applicant is eligible to receive assistance under the co-op grant program. It must identify the title and position authorized to submit the application. Be sure that if you are submitting the application, you're also not the one giving yourself the authority to submit. So you can't like self-authorize yourself to submit the resolution. So if you are an executive director, for example, and you're the one submitting the application, you would need your board member or someone to sign that resolution. It also needs to indicate that there's sufficient startup funds available to meet the applicant's needs prior to being reimbursed by TPWD, and it needs to have the amount approved that you're requesting on the grant application. So I want to stop here for a second and just mention, so you want to be sure that what you're submitting in your budget matches what you're authorized on this resolution. They need to match, or the resolution could be for more than that. What can't not happen is the resolution cannot be less than what you're applying for. If it is less, your application may not be reviewed. So it would be better to, I know budgets, as a previous grant writer, believe me, I get it. Budgets change right up to the last minute. So what you may want to do is ask the resolution to indicate more than you might actually need, up to $100,000. Moving to what we fund. We fund, the applications must focus on one or more of the co-op priorities. These priorities include outdoor recreation. They must accommodate high quality participation and mission-oriented outdoor recreation. They should facilitate access. They must facilitate facilitate access to TPWD owned and operated facilities, staff, or sites, or resources. What we look for is a focus on TPWD connections, such as camping, paddling, fishing at state parks, adaptive outdoor recreation at state parks, shooting sports related to TPWD archery and hunter ed. What we focus on is really the quality. We want to see repetitive skill building. We want to see repeat exposure because we want those participants to continue this activity once the grant ends. So that's within the outdoor recreation area. We also fund environmental education programs that provide environmental and cultural resource education for Texas natural resources and ecosystems. We want them to be utilizing TPWD education programs to develop mission-related lifelong behaviors. What we look for here is an in-depth, Texas-focused environmental education program that has a high likelihood of affecting the lifelong behaviors of participants. Again, as with the other elements, we're looking for that in-depth relationship rather than the one and done. For environmental education, for example, TPWD Project Wild is a great fit for environmental ed, and you'll have our special guest who happens to be with Project Wild today. And the last co-op priority is conservation. We want to see the cultivation of citizen participation in science-based stewardship of natural and cultural resources that result in tangible conservation benefits. What we're looking for is the development of the next generation of natural resource leaders and professionals. So talking a little bit about this, so if you have in your application, you might be planting trees. Yes, that'll make you eligible and it's tangible. But if you're planting those trees in partnership with a TPWD natural area or a state park, that will make your program much more competitive because again, we're looking for that relationship building. We're looking for comprehensive programs. On page 7 of the program guidance, whoops, I'm sorry, went a little too fast here. It's going to move forward on that one actually. So we're still talking about eligibility. The co-op program targets very specific demographics. So what happens back in 1996, so TPWD actually tracks who visits parks and sites and who uses our resources. And what they found is we were missing a whole lot of communities. And so this grant is really intended to partner with community organizations who already have those partnerships with these communities so that we can increase our exposure and our relationship with them. So the demographics that we are specifically looking for, we require a minimum of 40% in any one of these categories to be eligible. Although I will say that most projects target about 70%, but 40% will make it the application eligible. Specifically for the co-op grant, the participant focus includes minorities, females of any age, low-income households, and individuals with disabilities. So again, 40% in any one of those categories. Here's a bit more information about the grant that will help you determine your organization's eligibility and whether the co-op grant is a good fit. Again, this is a reimbursement grant program. Applicants awarded a grant will need to purchase approved items and submit the required documentation to be reimbursed for project cost. The grant supports outdoor programs and does not fund any type of construction, trails, boat ramps, exhibits, landscaping, or vehicles. To be eligible, the application must have a minimum of one eligible TPWD partnership within the proposed project. Although most successful grants exceed this requirement, this can include Texas Parks and Wildlife programs, sites, or staff. There is a handout. One of the handouts includes the list of those approved TPWD partnerships, and we'll be talking about that in more detail in a bit. I want to stop here just for a second and talk a little bit about the difference between being eligible and being competitive. So remember I talked about those things that make you eligible, serving at least 40% of any one of those demographics, having that resolution, having the UEI number, all those things I talked about. So what that means is if you have all these in place, your application is eligible to be reviewed. It doesn't necessarily mean that your application is competitive. So what we're focusing on in this workshop is helping you write a competitive grant application. Obviously, we're also including what makes it eligible, but what we're looking for is that serving the right underserved groups. We're looking for a focus on alignment with those co-op priorities. For example, picking up trash will give you a few points in that conservation area, but it will not probably make it very competitive if you're just picking up trash. If you integrate picking up trash with, the effect of micro trash on wildlife, that suddenly makes it much more competitive. If you're doing that within a state park, again, you're elevating, or a natural area, you're elevating your competitiveness even more. Think about what is likely to make an impact. We're looking for that lifelong change in behaviors or habits of those participants. A nice trip to a park would be, would be great, make you eligible. You've got that one relationship. But if you're really doing multiple trips to that park, you're really going in depth, you have incorporating leadership development, that's going to increase the competitiveness of your application. So what happens once we receive your application? Jessica and I review it to make sure all those eligibility pieces are in place. If they are in place, then your application gets reviewed by numerous TPWD experts who score your application, much like we score, we get a grant, a test, and you get a score on a test. And what you're seeing on the screen right there is what we score on. And Jessica is going to go into much more detail about these, so I'm not going to cover it in too much detail here. I just wanted to let you know what we look at. And also to point out, look at where those points, the highest points are. And so then when the grant review committees get together, they're actually looking at these and they're looking at how well you've responded to each of these. And I'm going to leave it here knowing that Jessica's going to go into more detail about this. By the way, this is also in greater detail included in the program guidance on page 19. I want to take a little time here just to show you some past projects that we've funded to give you a sense of what a competitive grant program grant project looks like. And as you're looking at these, think of why were they more competitive? Think of what demographics were they serving? What were the activities? Did they have multiple exposures? Were they in depth? Were they? Did they reflect a really strong partnership with TPWD? Look at leadership development. Did they include that? What would their conservation activities look like? So our first one is the National Federation for the Blind in the Project BOLD Blindness Outdoor Leadership Development. So this project was a two-part program in partnership with Palmetto State Park. So there you see that partnership with TPWD. They provided specialized adaptive training for 18 blind mentors. So there's that leadership and outdoor leadership and skills development. So they're developing skills, they've got the leadership, they're partnering with TPWD. Blind mentors led other blind youth in a 3-day, so there's that in-depth, in a 3-day camp-out experience. They created permanent wayfinder geotags on a park trail for visually impaired. El Paso Independent School District, their program was called Bike on Safety and Outdoor Learning. This program, they developed and they provided development and training for teachers to implement a 3-week mountain biking skills unit into middle school physical education classes. Their purchases included mountain bikes, helmets, bike trailer, riding equipment to expand the program to additional schools. They partnered with Franklin Mountain State Park to host family and group mountain bike rides on weekends. And the coolest thing about this maybe the coolest thing about this particular program is that 40% of these students didn't know how to ride a bike before this program. Casting for Recovery, Fly Fishing Retreat Program for breast cancer survivors. Obviously, they're hitting the female demographic populations. They partnered with the TPWD Angler Education Program. They provided training in angler education for the grantee staff, so there's that leadership. They use state park rental sites to host retreats that combined recovery support and engagement in the outdoors to promote healing. So they have the co-op priority there with the outdoor skills. They used our sites, they used our program, they have the leadership. So these are just a few of many wonderful programs that we have funded. These in particular, I think, really highlighted some of the things we've talked about. Next, we're going to dive into eligibility. We're going to talk about eligible and ineligible activities, and then we'll discuss eligible and ineligible expenses. So on page 10 of the program guidance, you will find this list. This is not an exhaustive list, and there's more there, but I wanted to show you just some of the eligible activities. These are the kinds of things that we see in our applications. As you consider and develop these activities into your program, focus on the TPWD connections, such as environmental education in partnership with Project Wild, or camping, paddling, fishing at state parks. Maybe highlight adaptive outdoor recreation if that's, if that fits your project. Shooting sports related to TPWD archery and hunter ed. Conservation, planting trees in partnership with a comprehensive conservation program. Partner with TPWD natural areas or state parks. Way better than simply just planting trees. So these are the types of activities that you may look at. Some of these we've already talked about. Thinking of some of the ineligible activities, some of the ones that we see pretty often that are not eligible include vegetable gardening, counseling, or therapy. Even though we all know being outdoors is wonderful for your mental health, we do not fund actual counseling programs or therapy programs. We no longer fund zipline or zoos. We used to fund those. We do no longer fund those. And we don't fund arts and crafts as a general arts and crafts project. We do fund arts and crafts supplies if they're in coordination and collaboration with part of your environmental education program. But otherwise, as a simple arts and crafts project, we do not fund those. We don't fund traditional sports, tournaments. We often see that. We don't fund public events. And that's even though they're wonderful, but there's no way to really know who's going to come, so we don't have an assurance of hitting those groups that we are hoping to recruit. So again, this is not all the things I mentioned are things we frequently see that are not eligible, but please look at this list before you submit your application. So what you're seeing on the screen now is actually our budget categories, and these can be found on page 11 through 19 in your program guidance. These are the actual categories within the budget. The following slides will go a bit deeper into understanding what the co-op grant can and cannot fund within each of these categories. We're going to go into some detail on each of these, especially focusing on any changes from previous competitions, as well as areas we most often see in applications, and we think some clarifications could be helpful. So beginning with personnel, what we allow, salaried, hourly, temporary employees, contractors, substitute teachers, stipends, and interns, so it's pretty generous. We don't pay fringe benefits except for the employer-paid FICA. That's the only one that we allow. And there's some detail about that in the program guidance and how to figure what that is. I think it's something like 7.35%, but look in the program guidance, don't take my word. All personnel, contractors, interns, etc., must provide direct support to the co-op funded activities. So we do not fund general administrative costs. We will fund things like bookkeepers if that bookkeeper has some time they're spending doing, co-op related activities, but general administrative fund staff we do not fund. Indirect costs, which fits into what I was just talking about, indirect costs are not allowable, including general administrative costs. This would also include things like air conditioning or phones, internet, things that you really can't itemize specifically of how much you're using for the co-op grant. What we are requiring, and we're being a little more strict about this time, is we want to see the hourly rate and the number of hours that each individual person is contributing to the co-op grant, and this should be outlined in your budget. I'm reading my notes to make sure I haven't missed anything here. I think I've covered it all. Eligible expenses. I'm going to talk a little bit about the meals and food. This is a change. Well, it's a change. This is the same as last year, but before that, we did allow restaurants. We are no longer allowing restaurants as a general rule. We do recognize there are times restaurants make sense. It's more an exception to the rule, but sometimes it does. But in every situation, that would require prior approval. So you would send an email to Jessica or myself and ask, get approval to go to the restaurant, explain why other options aren't available, and then we would need to know what's the estimated cost per person so that we can determine whether it's a reasonable cost. We have started seeing a lot of resources going to restaurants and lodging, which we'll talk about in a minute, and we're trying to pull back on that and get back to what the co-op grant's mission really is, which is to get people outdoors. The cost must be reasonable, in all cases. We also do not allow alcohol. If alcohol is present, that means it's not a co-op activity. And if alcohol is included on a receipt, we will not fund anything on that receipt. So wanted to be very clear about that. Lodging, I kind of hinted at this. TPWD has awesome lodging options. We have cabins, campsites, group halls, group barracks, shelters, and more. We have some cabins that are kind of like Lux houses. I don't know if you visited Bastrop, that's a really good example. We will no longer fund hotels, motels, Airbnbs as a general rule. We do recognize there are times where a hotel makes sense. For example, one of our grant recipients have participants who cannot regulate their body temperature. So clearly for that particular group, it makes a lot of sense for them to have a hotel rather than to be out camping. But in all cases, we do require pre-approval before that can be funded. The intent of this grant, as I mentioned, we're trying to get back to the roots of the co-op grant, and the intent of it is to be at campsites, cabins, shelters, rec facilities. We have a lot of things at the state parks. So please look at those. Feel free to contact us if you need more information about that. We do have people on our staff at TPWD who can help you find the perfect place for you to go. This is the fees category. This can include park fees. Grantees do not have special privileges when it comes to visiting a state park. So you should not expect to have your fees waived at the state park. Should not expect to have free tours or programs or free campsites. So please add those to your budget. We do fund those. We fund them all the time. We want to fund them. We prefer to have that than ask the parks to waive the fees for you. Okay, and you might also consider purchasing a youth group pass if you're serving youth. That's a much more economical way to go. One thing's mentioned here is that we do not allow items, except for a few safety items, which we'll talk about later, but we do not allow items to be given to participants, and this includes park passes. So do not include park passes to be given to participants, but you certainly can include park fees to go visit or camp. We expect to see things like Project Wild and other training fees. Professional development fees could be here. We in this section, we also ask about program income. We don't allow I want to go back to this for a second. We don't allow scholarships And we don't allow fees to be paid to your own organization. We will ask you if you have program income, and some program income is okay. We do have some organizations who have found that charging $10 or $20 per participant actually increases their participation rates if there's a little bit of cost connected to it. It's not necessary, and we definitely want to see a nominal fee there. If you do have program income, we do want to see some justification of why you're charging participants, co-op funded participants. Travel is another category. We are pretty generous here. We fund charter buses, vans, participant travel. We can cover mileage or gas. For example, if your staff is attending a training and that's in the approved budget and it's directly related to the co-op grant, we can pay their gas or mileage depending on, I think you'll know the difference between mileage and gas, but if you're using your own personal car, for example, that would be considered gas. That would be considered mileage. If you rented a charter bus and you're filling up the tank, that would be considered gas. But we can fund either one of those. We don't allow conference attendance, even though some conferences are awesome and they're very much aligned with co-op. It's just not something that we can fund. And all the trainings, your staff trainings must occur prior to actually delivering those programs. So for example, if your program is about paddling, we want to see your staff being trained in paddling before you actually offer those participants that paddling. We don't want to see that happening at the end of your grant project. Supplies and equipment. Basically, we cover all the supplies and equipment you need to do the project that you've outlined in your co-op grant. This could include outdoor recreation gear, adaptive equipment. Sometimes computers and electronics make sense, especially sometimes with those environmental or conservation projects. Telescopes, water testing. We also have education trunks. Often this is something we'll see, or a kind of a grab and go program such as Skin, Skulls, and Scat. Safety gear, this is where remember I said in some cases we will allow you to give things to participants, and that is only as it relates to safety gear. So this would be things such as hats for sun hats, water bottles, or t-shirts so that you can recognize your group when you're out and about. This is on page 18 of your program guidance, and it's some of the things that we do not fund. I'm going to talk about just a few of them that we sometimes will see most frequently that are not allowable. So we do not allow per diems or honorariums. I mentioned scholarships. We do not fund gratuities. We do not fund recognition events such as parties, pizza parties, etc. And as I mentioned, we do not allow things to be given directly to participants such as tents or park passes unless they're those safety related items such as water bottles, t-shirts, or sun hats. I mentioned earlier that we use recreation grants online. This is what it looks like. And there's this very long link here, which you could choose to type in, or the easiest thing to do is simply to Google TPWD co-op grant. And you do that, you get this screen that's going to pop up here. Before you can actually apply for a co-op grant, you need to establish a user account. And once you've done that, you'll be able to view all the grant activities. Our branch actually has several grant activities. The co-op is just one of those. And then you'll also find the co-op application here. I do want to point out, you don't have to establish an account to access the resources in Argo. So if you see there, if you've typed in TPWD co-op grant and you pulled up Argo, you will see the tab at the right that says resources. That is a great place to find all kinds of really helpful things when it comes to the co-op grant, including a copy of this PowerPoint, the program guidance, the application, the TPWD partnership document, which does have clickable links We'll talk about that. Jessica's going to talk about that. And there's a lot of other really good stuff there. So please do look at that. There's that UEI handout I mentioned. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, just think about this a little bit, your organizational capacity, things to consider while you're thinking about whether the co-op grant is a good grant for your organization. There is no match, right? There's no match for the co-op grant, but it's not free. It's definitely not free money. You will have some responsibilities tied to this. There is those quarterly reports I mentioned, tracking those participants and being sure that you can document that so that if you're audited, if we come visit you or you're audited by us, you can show us exactly where, how, and where you're tracking those and who they are. There is some compliance and accountability when it comes to delivering your program. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the reimbursement process. Think about the timeline. I talked about that grant agreement phase, so be sure that when you're really thinking through that timeline that you've considered that and considered time to get where those reimbursements can happen and whether they make sense for you. It takes a bit to order all those supplies and get everything lined up. The payments and documentation, as I mentioned, it's a bit to get reimbursed for the co-op grant. There's a lot of documentation that goes with that, and it takes a little time. It's an administrative burden, especially for small organizations. Also, think of the weather. As you're planning your activities, what happens when you have a cancellation? What happens if you have this great idea about TPWD staff, but they're not available? So before you submit your application, be sure you've considered these, have backup plans for the weather. Already contact those staff, and Jessica's gonna take a deep dive into that. And then, as I mentioned, the grant agreement phase. One thing I didn't mention is deductions. So this is actually written into administrative code. It's not our decision to do it, but it's not a bad idea. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. What happens is if you've gotten a co-op grant and you haven't met those things that you said you were going to do in your goals, or you are very bad at communicating with us, we're sending you emails, we're not hearing from you, and we're really having to chase you down, or you aren't able to spend, you've asked for a lot of money and you leave a lot of money left at the end of your grant. There's some very specific things. We are required to deduct points off your next grant application. So you don't want to be in that situation. So we just want you to think through all these pieces and develop a really realistic program for your organization. It's a great grant, and we want you to be successful at it. Okay, that ends the first part of our program. You've made it through. So we're going to have about a 10-minute break. It is, so we'll be back here at 1:55, and then you will take a deep dive with Jessica into actually writing that grant application. So see you in 10.
Hey folks, I hope you're still with us. This is Jessica with the Co-op Grant Program. And in part 2 of our webinar today, I am going to chat a little bit more about how to create a competitive application for the upcoming co-op grant cycle. So in your handout section, located on the control panel, you will see a blank sample application. If you'd like to follow along, if you don't have that handy, that's fine. I actually have some clips of the application to share with you, and you can always get the application a little later. There are some changes this year to the application, and I'm excited to share those with you. We're going to talk a little bit about the program performance goals, different elements of your project. We're going to dive into the direct relationships with TPWD section of the application. We'll talk a little bit about demographics, and then finally, I'll give you some tips on creating your budget. So the very first page of the application for the 26-27 grant cycle, it is now available online. And remember that the submission deadline is November 1st, 2025 at 5 p.m. That is a hard cutoff. The system shuts right down at 5:01 p.m. So don't wait until the last minute. Again, you have electronic copies with your confirmation. There's also a copy available in the Argo resources section. But do remember that the actual application is submitted electronically in the Recreation Grants online system. So the first 3 sections contain a lot of the information that Rena just went over in the first half of the workshop, and that includes the eligibility for the grant, the timeline of the grant cycle, and then your organization's information. These are fairly self-explanatory. I would encourage you to note that the application does have contact information for technical support, and then also Rena and I are also available to help you with your application. But today we're going to spend the most time on what I like to call the meat of the grant. We're going to start on page 5 of the application, and this is the project information. It's really the heart of your application, and it contains a lot of the really crucial details that help explain your project and your funding request. So the first few parts are fairly basic. It's your organization's mission, address, Texas district, but we're going to look at some commonly overlooked parts of this section that can impact your score here. So what we're looking at is the key personnel that are directly related to your proposed grant project. So this is just 5 points of the application, but it's not uncommon for a project to either get a grant award or not by just a point or 2. So every point counts. And in this specific section, this is where you will list any personnel that provide direct support to your grant project, and you'll include a short little blurb on their qualifications and their grant project related duties. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be really lengthy. It could list any degrees that are required, any specific certifications or trainings, and an explanation of what they'll be doing to support your grant funded project. So what we ask is, please don't just cut and paste an entire job description in this section. We're really looking for just the duties that support the grant funded project. We use this section to help us assess the need for grant funding, especially if you're requesting personnel costs later on in your budget. And we use it to assess, is the hourly rate reasonable? We look at the direct program roles. And so even though this section is small and it's just 5 points, it really does impact your overall application. So a couple quick things to think about here. Only list personnel who directly support your grant project proposal. Think ahead a little bit to your budget, especially if you are going to be requesting grant funds to cover personnel costs. And if you have a vacant position, you are allowed to just put "to be hired" in the name box. And then you can fill in the title, what their grant-related duties might be, and the hiring qualifications. But if it is a vacant position, just put "to be hired" in that name box. Let's go ahead and look at a sample together of what this might look like. So you can see I have myself, Jessica Lagallo. My title is a camp director. The summary of grant-related duties. You can see that in this position as a camp director, it's pretty comprehensive. The camp director will oversee recruitment, registration, staff hiring, training, program scheduling. They're on site during all activities to monitor safety and program quality. They will be collecting all the demographics and data and supervising all the camp counselors. You can also see the qualifications are pretty extensive. So when we look at the budget, if you're asking for salary for your camp director position, if you're saying it's $30 an hour, for example, we'll go back and look at the duties and qualifications to assess if that's reasonable. Looking at the camp counselor title, you can see it's a minimum of 1 year of experience. They're leading small groups of campers. And again, we're using this to assess the reasonableness of your budget. So if you're asking for $30 an hour for a camp counselor, we would probably be asking some questions, and that might be a red flag just because of the level of experience and the duties. So this part is really critical, and it's important to align all the positions in this section to any personnel costs listed later on in your budget. Moving on to page 6, this is where the project description begins. And the most important tip here is to really ensure that each of the sections throughout this application are aligned so that you're really completing a concise and consistent picture of the project that is being proposed. So new this year, we are asking the primary project focus area. You can choose from environmental education, conservation, or outdoor recreation. So this helps our review committee understand your project's focus right off the bat. Now, I know what some of you are probably thinking. We would probably check all 3 of these, and that may be possible, but I would recommend just don't overthink it. If fishing and angler education make up most of your activities, that would be outdoor recreation, and you can then explain the educational components later on in the application. This is just that very first clue to our review committee about what this grant project proposal is going to be about. So refrain from just checking all 3. It doesn't help your score. It is very rare that the core focus of a grant project would be all 3. Moving on to number 2, the project name. So I would encourage you to get creative. If you're awarded a grant, whatever name you put in number 2, this section, is the name of the project that goes out in all of our press releases and out to the legislature and out to your community. So which sounds better? Smith Elementary Astronomy Grant Project, or Soaring into the Stars with Smith Elementary? So again, get creative with your project name. Now we also have a brief project summary. This is slightly new this year, and this should really just be the bare bones of your proposal. Think about those 5 W's: who, what, where, and when. That being said, we don't really need the why. There's a cap of 800 characters here, and we already know why life is better outside and why it's great to get folks in the outdoors. So we don't necessarily need your why. Your proposal is being read by conservation and outdoor professionals, but we do want to know the bare bones. Where is it going to take place? What is the project focus? who will be participating in your project? And when will the program take place? Is it a year-long program? Is this just a summer camp program? So again, this is a very brief project summary. New this year, we have a section for performance goals. If you have applied with the co-op grant before, these were formerly called SMART goals. Overall, our objective is the same. We're looking for very specific and measurable goals that state the deliverables of your program. So we've kind of drilled down on the program goals to help distill the quantitative and the measurable elements of your project. So in this section, what we're not looking for, we're not looking for really flowery language or quotes or literature citations or how you expect your programs to make participants feel like participants will enjoy camping. What we are looking for in this section is very specific details. We're looking for the duration of the program. So if you can include the number of contact hours, the number of days, is it monthly, weekly? Are these half-day programs? We're also looking for when, the approximate month or time of year that the activities delivered will take place. So are you offering field trips to wildlife management areas in the summer of 2027? Or are you offering Project Wild activities year-round during the school year? We also want to know the number of participants to be served during specific activities. So let's say you're offering a summer day camp, and that's going to serve approximately 100 campers. And you're also offering an after-school program during the school year, and that will serve 150 students. You want to make sure that you are clearly identifying all eligible TPWD relationship elements that are to be completed during the grant period, whether that's visiting a TPW site, using TPWD programs, or interacting with TPWD staff. All of those elements need to be present in your performance goals. These are really, again, the deliverables, the outcomes, the measurable, specific details of the program you're proposing. The next section, you'll get to explain more of kind of the impact and different details of your program. But the performance goals are just that. They are very specific performance goals that state the outcomes. Let's spend a little bit of time looking at some examples here. The key here is that we're looking for quantitative, very specific and measurable units based on counts, like number of participants, the number of programs, the number of trainings. What we're not looking for would be something like, we hope to increase confidence in the outdoors by offering a summer camp. For us, that's very hard to ensure accountability or measurability. Let's look at example 1 together. Coordinate 5 3-day, 2-night, overnight camping weekends at DFW area Texas State Parks during the spring and summer of 2026 to introduce basic camping skills. Each campout will host 10 families and include 2-hour workshop rotations to learn kayaking, fishing, and archery skills. So that goal has a lot of measurable and specific components, and this helps our review committee assess approximately how many contact hours participants are engaged in, the type of activities, any type of TPWD site or relationship present. We can get all of that just in the first goal. Let's take a look at goal 2, a different type of program.
4 program staff will attend and complete the TPWD Aquatic Science Training in spring of 2026 to engage 30 youth in monthly aquatic science and water testing workshops over the 2026-27 school year to monitor the health of the Brazos River. Now, in this example, they actually included 5 hours per week for 20 weeks, 100 contact hours per participant. That's also an option in your goals. Let's take a look at one final example. And remember, these are quantitative, specific, and measurable with different units. Goal 3, lead 10 full-day saltwater and 10 full-day freshwater boat trips in the Galveston Bay area, with each trip hosting 8 women over a period of 18 months. Each participant will attend 2 trips and will receive 6 hours of TPWD angler education instruction prior to the fishing boat trip. So again, this includes when or the approximate month or time of year that the grant programs will take place, the approximate number of participants, and it includes a clearly identifiable TPWD relationship element that is to be completed. So these are just some examples. One of the frequently asked questions is, how many performance goals should I list? And I will tell you, that's a really difficult question to answer because everyone's grant-funded programs are so very different. Some are very simple, like an 8-week summer camp. Some are more complex, where you have a summer camp, an after-school program, several campouts, and a family day. Each one of those would probably be their own goal. But on average, most projects have between 4 to 6 goals. If you need help with that, please don't hesitate to reach out to Rena or myself, and we can kind of help talk through what those goals should look like for your proposal. We're going to move on, and on the sample application, you will see a new section of the application. This is on page 7, and I'm happy to share with you that our 20,000 word narrative section is now gone. For those of you who have applied before, this new section, Proposed Project Elements, replaces that former narrative section of the application. This was a character count of 20,000 character description words that was very difficult to pull specific scoring elements from. So the good news is this year, we are aligning the application with the exact elements that our scoring committee is looking for. We are looking and awarding points on the impact of your grant project that's being proposed, different elements of leadership potential, active learning in the outdoors, environmental benefits and conservation efforts, and finally, we do score and look closely at the feasibility of the project that you're being proposed. Can this project be delivered as it's proposed? So again, be sure that anything described in these sections, proposed project elements, are fully aligned with the performance goals that you created in the last section. Try to avoid just throwing in extra elements for points. If it's not in the goals that you just created above on the application, then it should not be in your proposed project elements in this section. Let's take a closer look at what's being scored on your application in each of these elements during the review process. We're going to start with A, impact. So when you're sharing more information about your proposed project, we're looking to see what elements of your project develop lifelong behavior change related to the outdoors. So consider the impact of engaging participants in multiple outdoor experiences over an extended period of time. We're looking for things like progressive skill building that might lead to more independent mastery. And we're looking at the relevancy to the mission of the co-op grant program. This is 1,500 characters or less, so it is really important that you're concise I would ask you to consider a couple of examples here. Which project might receive a higher score in this section? A one-time field trip for 40 participants to a wildlife management area, or a 5-day backpacking trip for 20 participants at a local state park. Now, both of those are eligible activities, and we certainly fund projects with both of those components. But when we're talking about creating a competitive application, and we're talking about increasing scores, the project that is just a one-time field trip would probably not receive as many points in this section as the project that is proposing a 5-day backpacking trip. So the one-time field trip may have 40 participants, but it's kind of a one and done kind of activity, less impactful than, say, a 5-day backpacking trip. So I hope you find that example helpful, and there are some guiding questions on the application as well. The next part is leadership. So here is where we're asking you to describe any elements of significant leadership or skill development in the field specifically to natural resources, outdoor recreation, or conservation. So some good examples here in this section would be if you are having your staff participate in training or certification programs, whether that's ACA kayak training, whether that's basic wilderness first aid, whether that's sending your staff to programs like TPWD angler education, boater education, hunter education. If you're offering internships or formal mentoring programs, this could also be programs that are focused on careers with direct contact professionals like game wardens or biologists. So consider some of those leadership elements of your program. Again, I'm going to give a couple of examples. So if your staff is participating in a certification program in archery instructor education, we would hope that that would add to their resume and their overall skill set in their job. So that would certainly qualify as leadership elements in your grant program. You may have an overnight campout where older high school youth serve as mentors and group leaders to younger elementary students during a campout. That would definitely score points in this section on leadership. So be sure to really describe any elements of leadership skill development in this part of the application. Another element that our review committee is scoring on would be active learning. We want to get people in the outdoors. So this section, you need to tell us, how are your participants engaged in the outdoors? How do your activities ensure participants are engaged and hands-on and active learning that really promotes skill development? So a couple examples. Again, think on this, which might receive a higher score. If you have a group of participants in your program and they're watching a park ranger demonstrate kayak paddling techniques, and then they're actually getting in the kayaks and paddling for 30 minutes, that is still a great program. But if we're talking about developing a deeper impact and more active learning, if you were to have a group of participants engage in hands-on paddling strokes on dry land, like you can see in this picture, then they have a 30-minute session on the water where they're practicing those strokes and receiving feedback and mentoring. And then they're going out independently with their group on a 1-hour group paddling trip. So again, while these are both eligible program components, you can see how one has a lot more active learning than the other. One final element that we are looking for would be environmental benefits. So how does your proposed grant project promote hands-on conservation and understanding of environmental issues? Are your participants engaging in meaningful actions to become the future stewards of Texas lands. Now, we do not require a conservation service project, but there are different ways to incorporate environmental benefits in your project. Something like a 30-minute trash pickup around the school is what we see most often, but if we're talking about creating a competitive, high-scoring application, you might consider first a lesson on the impact of microplastics to local wildlife. Maybe that's followed by a 45-minute microplastic blitz guided hike and a debrief to then assess participant findings contributing to environmental benefits. So again, this section, we do not require a conservation service project, but there are lots of different ways to teach stewardship within your program. We also look at things like our hunter education programs. Those often incorporate a lot of ecological principles and teaching lessons about deer populations, habitat conservation, and those also gain points here in environmental benefits. Another part of your application is trying to assess whether you have really thought through the logistics of the project that's being proposed. Are there strong assurances that your project will take place as you've described it? We're looking at, have you considered alternate plans if there's bad weather? We're looking at things like risk management and the training that your staff need to have to lead the programs that you're proposing. So some common red flags that we see here, when we see grant proposals that have extended outdoor recreation activities, like in the high heat of August, especially for first time or very young participants, that's often a red flag for us before considering awarding a grant project, that it may not be well attended. Doing overnight campouts for first time participants, especially in high heat in August, really presents some challenges. Do you have activities like rock climbing or rappelling being proposed, but when we look at your staff qualifications, there's no evidence that your staff have any training or certifications to safely lead an activity like rappelling or climbing? Or we're also looking to see maybe you're hiring a contractor or someone to deliver those programs for you. So we're really looking at the feasibility of what you're proposing. We're looking at some of the risk management and safety factors and making sure that you have a good, solid plan. Okay, we're going to move on to page 8 in the application. And this section is supported by a document that's available in your resources, or you can find it online in the Argo system and also in your email confirmation. This is a priority of the Co-op grant program. And our goal, of course, in the program is to connect participants to TPWD sites. That could be state parks, wildlife management areas, fisheries, programs and trainings with TPWD or TPWD staff. So these include lots of different TPWD resources, education and curriculum programs, and participants working directly with TPWD personnel, not volunteers necessarily. We do require commitment letters for many programs to ensure accountability. So an example here would be if you have a visit from a game warden to a classroom of students to talk about natural resource careers in August of 2027, you would need to have a commitment letter from that game warden with your application to help provide an assurance that that game warden has agreed to do that. Let's talk about some of the programs that do require commitment letters and some that don't. But when we're looking at direct relationships with Texas Parks and Wildlife, In terms of scoring, we are focused on the quality of participant involvement with a sustained direct connection to Texas Parks and Wildlife. We're trying to build that relationship between Texans and the Texas Parks and Wildlife Agency. We value deeper connections over time and repeat exposure. So not all TPWD programs are eligible for the co-op grant program. And I'll give you a good example of a fantastic program with our agency that is not an eligible relationship with co-op. We do have a program within our agency called Becoming an Outdoor Woman. And it's a program that introduces females specifically to outdoor recreation, outdoor skill building, in the outdoors. It's an overnight program mentored by professional instructors, everything from outdoor cooking, paddling. It's a fantastic program. However, it is a very competitive program. Registration happens once or twice a year. They typically sell out within 1 or 2 hours. If you were to base a grant project proposal on the Becoming an Outdoor Woman program, and we gave you $60,000 grant award, if you are not able to register and be accepted into that program, then of course that presents a true challenge in delivering a grant-funded program. So the approved programs for co-op can be found in that document, and they're also here on the application. These would be visits to TPWD sites, such as the state park. That could be a day trip, it could be an overnight camping trip, or even a stay in one of our lodges or barracks or other facilities. It could be a program with a park ranger. Now again, some of these have little stars by them. In your project proposal, if you say a park ranger is going to provide a private field trip about animal tracking or a private guided tour of Seminole Canyon, this would require a letter of commitment to be uploaded with your application so that that park ranger has agreed to do that program with you if you get funded. What we often see happen is without that letter of commitment, we'll see proposals that say, for instance, a wildlife biologist is going to come to our school and present 6 programs about Texas ecology. We award that grant. And then when it comes time to implement that project, it turns out the organization hasn't had a conversation with the wildlife biologist and their schedule is very busy and they're not able to come do outreach at the school. And again, that presents a really specific challenge. So the commitment letters are clearly marked. If it's a public program, like a public Project Wild curriculum training, you do not need a commitment letter. If you say that Project Wild instructor will come to your site and train your 20 camp counselors, that's a private training that would require a letter of commitment. There are many other TPWD programs and relationships that qualify for co-op. Any of our education courses, hunter education can be for any participant 9 or older. Boater education would be for any participant 13 and older. Any interaction with our staff, like the urban biologist, game warden, other TPD in-person staff, our outreach programs, you're going to hear a little bit later on in this presentation from our Texas Outdoor Family program, our distance learning program, or our Buffalo Soldier Heritage Outreach program. And of course, all of our other sites, from paddling trails to fish hatcheries, to Sea Center, Texas, freshwater fisheries. Some red flags we see would be any of the national parks. While we highly encourage you to visit national parks, those are not owned by Texas Parks and Wildlife or the state of Texas. Another one of those might be a city or local park. Those would not qualify as a TPWD relationship. And of course, a lot of the Texas historical sites around the state of Texas those are administered by the Texas Historic Commission and not Texas Parks and Wildlife. If you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out to Rena or myself, and we can help direct you to the right sites. On the document that has the approved resources, there are clickable links for contact information. So if you wanted to reach out to a park ranger to see if they would do a private field trip, there are links here to specific parks and contact information where you could email them. If you'd like to see what types of facilities and programs that you could include in your grant, again, it's not just tent camping anymore. We have barracks, we have bunkhouses, we have dining and recreation halls. We also have specific campsites that are just for nonprofits or youth. And again, if you were interested in signing your staff up for any type of training or instructor certifications, these are clickable links that link to our staff where you can have a conversation about how that might happen in your program and get the appropriate commitment letter. Here are just a few more trainings and certifications. One more last tip I'd like to share. Project Wild is a very popular component in co-op grants, and it is eligible. But when we talk about a competitive grant project, if you are simply integrating some Project Wild activities into your project over 18 months, I will share that those typically do not score high enough to be awarded a co-op grant. We would encourage you to include some other programs or sites in addition to those Project Wild lessons, or hopefully we'll hear Sarah chat about Project Wild in just a few minutes here. Get more instructors trained or even have your staff trained as facilitators to help build project capacity. We also have some staff partnerships, and of course there's also lots of volunteer and service project opportunities as well at our parks. Our parks love volunteers and would love to have your group come out and do a volunteer project. We're going to hear from just a moment from the Texas Outdoor Family Program, but these are guided weekend workshops that focus on engaging first-time campers, and this program does require a partnership letter with TOF, and I'm going to let Lisa tell you more about that. So at this point, I am going to switch over and let our guests come in. And I'm going to start with Sarah, who is our Project Wild lead with our agency. We're going to switch over to Sarah, and she's going to tell you more about using Project Wild as part of your grant program. We're going to send this over to Sarah in just a moment.
Great, thanks, Jessica. As Jessica said, I'm Sarah Jost. I am the Project Wild coordinator with the agency. Excited to be with y'all today and talk a little bit about this education program we offer. If you have not heard of Project Wild, it is a national program published by the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies and distributed by us to PWD here in the state. Our kind of tagline is that we teach kids how to think, not what to think about wildlife. So these are curriculum guides, educational activities, as Jessica and Rena have both alluded to, that are easy to use. They have background information. They're indoor and outdoor activities. Those of you who work with school groups, either in a school or maybe you're serving kids at a school at your site, they are correlated with our state standards. And if people working at your site come to our workshops, they can earn TEA credit towards their teaching certification. But we really like these for all groups, even if you're not necessarily in a formal education facility. They really help young people think about analysis and classification, problem solving, and just really an awareness of conservation and wildlife issues. So here in Texas, we support 3 main guides. Our Project Wild flagship guide is the terrestrial guide, so land-based. animals, habitats, ecosystems. It's 81 activities for K through 12th grade. We use them with high schoolers, some of them scale down. But if you're serving that approximately kindergarten through senior in high school, this is a good guide and has the most activities in it. It does have an aquatic counterpart. So if you work in ponds, lakes, rivers, you're on the coast somewhere, you may consider the aquatic wild guide. Same age range, 55 activities, but again, now all water-based or animals that live in or near water. And if you work with our youngest learners across Texas, you might consider Growing Up Wild. This is 27 activities for early childhood, ages 3 to 7, to get them just used to going outdoors, exploring the natural world. And for those of you in parts of the state where you maybe you serve a Spanish-speaking audience, it also is published as Creciendo Wild in a completely Spanish format. And so people who use Project Wild, we've talked a little about classroom teachers, university pre-service, but also people who work at nature centers. That's my background, working at nature centers and field trip sites, aquariums, museums. It's great for summer camp staff and after school programs. Parents use it sometimes with their kids, just again, trying to figure out how to go outside and explore. Community groups like Master Naturalists like to have these in their back pocket. But lots of people, this isn't just for a classroom teacher. Again, if you teach kids, work with kids, and are looking to play games, do guided nature walks, just get kids outdoors exploring and learning, there's probably some Project Wild activities for you. So in the non-formal, informal worlds, groups and games are big. There's a lot of them. Several guided explorations, things like an urban nature search or water safari, thinking about walking around a facility, figuring out where animals like squirrels who live there, where would they get their water from? Very cross-curricular. So we talk a lot about science, but there's a lot of PE in here, games, animal versions of Red Rover or Quick Freeze, Quick Frozen Critters is freeze tag. Things like nature journaling or guiding students through that if you're in a reading and writing program. A lot of these can help increase the comfort both in the educator being outdoors, but also in the students you're serving. And ideally, we're increasing, again, those awareness of conservation issues. If you don't know that something either lives in Texas or maybe has some threats to it, you can't protect it. And so these are hopefully fun and engaging ways to get young people learning and thinking about that. So the guides themselves, every activity is going to tell you what age it's meant for, materials and time needed. What do you need to do it? Whether it's indoor or outdoor. Is it a small group or large group activity? There's thorough background information. We don't expect you to be experts in wildlife. That's why you would come to a program and get the guide. Procedure, step-by-step instructions, exactly how to lead a game, what you would need, printable student pages if it's something like a card game, vocabulary. And then in Growing Up Wild, every activity has a song and a snack, which is a lot of fun. And we talked about the number of activities in each guide, but also realized that they have things like how to take students outside safely and good field ethics, right? When would you pick a wildflower? If you're going to bring an insect or a lizard in for observation, how do you do that while being mindful and respectful? Keeping classroom animals, if you want to keep an animal in your classroom, set up an aquarium at a facility, an after school camp. How do you do that? Do it responsibly. And then Jessica talks about conservation projects. There's also guides in the end of the book about service learning. So pretty comprehensive materials. To get them, you attend an educator workshop. These workshops are led by what we call our facilitator network. These are people who are considered TPWD volunteers, but are often professionals at other facilities, and they lead these around the state at different times. Growing Up Wild is a 3-hour minimum. Project Wild or Aquatic Wild are 6-hour minimums. Each guide is $35 a person. So if you're interested in getting Project Wild training, you can find one of our workshops if there's one happening in your community. They are on the TPWD calendar link. Or if you have 10 or more people, or you're willing to host the community at your site and can get us up over 10, we can come and bring a training to you. An example of that last year was the El Paso YWCA needed training. There's not many that happen in El Paso, but they were generous enough to open up for the community. So we also had the librarians join us, and a couple of community volunteers came to their workshop as well. They paid their own way. That didn't come out of the co-op grant, but to make the group large enough, they went ahead and let other people register. And so that worked out really well. If you have already come to Project Wild and you want to be able to teach your staff, you might consider becoming a facilitator. Again, these are people who lead those educator workshops for us. That's a 12-hour training. Ideally, you've already come to one of the 6-hour ones. You do a 2-hour virtual online where we talk about how this works. You do some offline work in preparation for a 5-hour in-day, and that is a $50 fee per person. The 3 upcoming opportunities listed here would be before this co-op grant cycle, but if this is something you might professionally want to pursue so that you are already ready to be a facilitator if you got your grant in 2026, these would get you ready. So these are fall of 2025 opportunities in Junction, in the Rio Grande Valley, and in Tyler. And just if you want more information about Project Wild, again, you can find our workshop calendar. You can find sample activities from the guides at tpwd.texas.gov, education, and then Project Wild. Or you can find things at the national level by going to fishandwildlife.org/Project Wild. My contact information is here. I'm happy to be contacted, and I believe these slides are being shared with you all afterwards. Thanks again, Jessica and Rena, for your inclusion.
Much, Sarah, for joining us today. We hope that gives our potential applicants some great ideas. As a reminder, any type of fees associated with these types of TPWD programs can be included in your grant budget and paid for by the co-op grant. So next up, I would like to invite our Texas Outdoor Family Houston Regional Lead, Lisa Resniak, to share more about that program with our co-op applicants. Lisa, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Lisa, you're good to go.
Cool, solid. Are you also able to see my website?
Yes, we are.
Delighted. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Hi, my name is Lisa Jean Resniak, and I work for the Texas Outdoor Family Program here in the Houston area. And I'm excited to celebrate the co-op grants applications that are coming in, and hopefully find some new partners who are willing to connect families and youth groups to nature here in our Texas state parks through the acts of camping. And that's what the Texas Outdoor Family Program is all about. So what you're looking at currently is the Texas Parks and Wildlife website. And I've gone into the state parks programs, and we're with the Texas Outdoor Family Program. And essentially we focus on camping experiences. And the goal for the program is to reduce the barriers that some of our audiences may encounter when they're attempting to come out for their first or maybe their 5th or their 10th camping experience. And so we want to try to reduce some of the barriers of resources or information, or maybe a lack of belonging. All of these things we're overcoming with TOF, or the Texas Outdoor Family Program. And while I am here in Houston, I have many counterparts that are statewide. We generally focus around the metroplexes though. So I'm here in Houston, and I have a counterpart that does the same job in the Austin and San Antonio area. And I have another friend who does this job up in the DFW. So we're hoping that we can find some good opportunities and outlets for anybody who's interested in getting some of these metro audiences out for maybe their first camping experience. And so this is what the public sees. It is introducing them. We have open public workshops. So you or anybody you want to can choose a camping workshop. We have a lot of them listed. So these are all the various overnight. So these are Friday, Saturday, and Sunday events that happen all across the state. And that includes not only camping events, like let's say November 15th at Cedar Hill for one night, but it also includes trainings. So we do provide camping experiences for the public. So if somebody wanted to go to the Cedar Hill Public Workshop, they could find out more about the program, and we essentially would provide them all of the equipment. So everything that you see listed here, and that would include specialized gear such as bikes and kayaks or GPS units for geocaching, Dutch ovens. So we would provide all of this to anybody from the public, but then also we're looking for partner organizations who can help us to provide this experience as well. So this is what the public would pay, be $75 for a one night or $95 for a 2-night event. But if you were to partner with us and help and support us by bringing the audience, recruiting them, and then also helping with their training, we in turn would provide a reduction in that cost. So $75 is essentially all of the camping reservations, the fees to get into the state parks, the gear rental, and the instruction. But if we work with organizations or partners, we're hoping to reduce that cost even more. And we work with both families and with youth. So you can find out more about what the public would see by going through the workshop calendar. But I think why I'm here today is to talk more about how we can partner with organizations like yours and how we could work together to help support your co-op grant application. So we have a Texas Outdoor Family Community Partners website that has a lot more information than what the public would normally see, where it does show you that, yes, we're providing all the gear, but we also want to reduce those barriers for our partner organizations. And we also want to provide you with training and support as you start your own camping experiences. So we partner with about 50 different organizations. Those are nonprofits or school districts. We work with churches and communities of faith. And we're specifically looking for audiences that may have additional barriers. So we're looking for co-op grant recipients, we're looking for veteran service organizations, and then low-income audiences as well. So that's who we're targeting when we're looking to partner with organizations, is to find somebody beyond just the public, but rather focusing on getting these new users out. And we do work with families, so if you have a family, you can certainly come on out. But because we work with schools and youth groups, we are also working with youth-only organizations. So if you have like an after-school program, or if you have like a church youth group, something like that, that meets our eligibility requirements, then we'd love to have you out. And we don't expect our audience to come with experience in camping, like we give that to them, but we also don't expect that from our partner organizations. So even if you don't have any camping experience at all, know that we're here to help and support. So we do provide outdoor leadership training, and we also do provide sort of a tiered growth model, where, like we give you this training and like that's a great experience, but the application of that can be extensive when you're talking about coordinating families and reservations and safety aspects and weather and all sorts of stuff that you would have to deal with when you're camping. And so we have a tiered system where we support you. We basically do the first camping workshop, And eventually you work up to your own independence, where you may not even need TPWD to be there for your camping workshop. And that's mostly just based upon an individual level. So it'd be lovely to be like campsite, like camping workshop 1, we do everything, by the 3rd workshop, you're on your own, but not everybody comes with that comfort and that experience. As I said, we have a tiered growth with our partners, and we do this regionally. So I'm getting ready to have an outdoor leadership training here in Houston at Lake Livingston State Park in just a few weeks. And any of my partner organizations that go through the training with me would also have the same level of partnership and
Hey, thank you so much, Lisa. It looks like, of course, it wouldn't be a webinar unless we had some connectivity issues, but I think we got most of the presentation from Lisa. I want to thank you so much for chatting with our potential applicants, and there is such great synergy really between the Texas Outdoor Family Program and the Co-op Grant Program. There's so many of those elements that Co-op is looking for, like leadership and skill building and serving underrepresented audiences that Texas Outdoor Family provides as such a natural partnership for so many of our grantees. We're going to continue talking about a couple more elements of the application. We're going to talk a little bit more about demographics, and then we're also going to look at some sample budgets. So some important stuff coming up here. Bear with me for just a moment, and we're going to keep moving this forward. All right. We're going to move over to page 9 of the sample application. So towards the end of the application, we are looking for a general timeline. So there's a couple reasons why we're looking at this. We want to make sure that you've really thought about your proposal logistically. Awards are announced in March, so it's really important that you're realistic about spring programs and events. Like Rena said, our grant agreements, the administrative paperwork and advance payments can take up to 30 days. If you have a new program planning spring events, be aware that funding and formal grant agreements can take some time, as well as recruiting your participants and getting your site reservations. So if you have a brand new program, you may want to consider kind of kicking some of those newer programs into the following spring or even into the fall. A couple things to remember here: special events are not allowed. And by that, I mean events that are open to the general public. So we don't allow things like an Earth Day festival or a fishing competition. And part of that reason is because we do require that you report demographics. And at an open event like that, that's just open to the public, that's just not realistic. So I have some examples here on the timeline. You want to make sure you're not putting things like your planning time or partner meetings. We're really looking at the flow of your project. Is it realistic? We're looking at logistics. You can keep the dates very general to allow for flexibility. You don't necessarily have to put a specific site under location, but maybe give us an idea of what the target is. So Central Texas area state parks would be fine. You don't necessarily have to name the park, because really, what if they are over capacity and you can't get reservations there? You want to make sure you have the flexibility. So keep those dates somewhat general as well. You don't have to tell us you're going to do a camp out on April 1st of 2026. You could just put April of 2026 or spring of 2026. That gives you a little more flexibility as well. Make sure that you review your performance goals. Make sure they are aligned to your timeline. So if your performance goals talks about sending your staff to Project Wild training, that should be here on your timeline. If your performance goals talk about 3 family weekend campouts, each of those should be here on the timeline. If your performance goals mention a conservation service project, that should be here on your timeline. There is an optional option to upload an itinerary. It is recommended, whether that's like a sample agenda or a program outline for repeat programs or an outline of your summer camp or what that field trip might look like, for a half day. That can really give our scoring committee deeper insight into the depth of your participants' experience and the impact of your program. So we do also highly encourage uploading an itinerary. We're going to move on to the next page to talk a little bit about demographics. So as you know, the mission of the Co-op Grant Program is to reach underserved audiences, and that is new users. So we're asking first about who you are serving, and we're looking at the number of participants that you are proposing to serve. And we are talking about unduplicated. So you may have an after-school program and it's the same 50 kids that come once a month for 10 months. So what we're asking for is not adding up all the participants every month, but the unduplicated. So if you're serving the same 40 kids each month, the total unduplicated participants to be served would be 40. We do encourage you to be conservative. The amount of participants that you put on this line will transfer to your formal legal grant agreement if awarded, and you are accountable to have that documentation and to serve the number of participants that you proposed. That being said, we're also asking you to explain how you calculated this number. If there's multiple aspects, then explain each aspect. So let's say for the after-school program, you are partnering with Smith Elementary School, great. And then for your summer camping program, you're going to partner with the YMCA to provide participants. That's great. But we do need some type of assurance that participants are going to be attending your program. A red flag we see is it's a fantastic planned outdoor recreation program, and then for participants it says we're going to partner with Houston ISD and serve 500 kids, but when it comes time to deliver the program, the organization has never talked to Houston ISD, and Houston ISD is very busy and has testing and has many other things to do, and there are no principals that are agreeing to participate in your program. So we do require a community partnership letter if your participants are coming from a partner organization. So if you say you are partnering with Smith Elementary School and they are going to send 300 kids to your summer camp, we need a letter from an administrator or teacher or someone at Smith Elementary School that says if you get the grant, they will participate in your program. Otherwise, we can't give you credit and we will have low assurance that your program is actually realistic. We do have lots of examples of community partnership letters available on our resources page. These are not character references. It's not your local church writing a letter saying that your organization provides a great service to the community and does a great job and gets people outside. That is not what the community partnership letter intent is for. That letter is to provide documentation and assurance that participants are actually going to attend your program. I do encourage you to be conservative, and it's important that you actually overperform than underperform. Let's talk about demographics. So the Co-op grant program seeks to engage new users and underrepresented audiences. So in the grant application, you'll need to provide a breakout of the participant demographics, as well as explain how you estimated that and how you will ensure that you're reaching underrepresented audiences. There's lots of different ways to find that data, especially if you've done this with past programming. But you must report on actual demographics that you've served. And we can't just use a demographic estimate like a census report in a certain area. If you're serving 50 kids, you can't use the entire Houston ISD demographics from their webpage because there's no assurance that those 50 kids will meet the demographics of an entire ISD. We do require a minimum of 40% of any one group. I want to mention that the goal here is not to serve every single group. It's very unlikely that you would serve female minority members that are low income and have a disability. That's kind of a red flag for us about really realistically having those participants come. So choose one or two groups, at least 40%. And it must be a deliberate intent to reach an underserved audience. You can't just say, well, approximately 40% of all of our programs are attended by girls, therefore we're eligible. That's not really a deliberate intent to reach an underserved audience like females and engaging females in the outdoors. So we want to see a deliberate intent to reach an underserved audience. So again, you are required to collect actual demographics for individual participants, and there's a couple different ways to do this. If you have past program data where you've collected that information, for instance, you've run the same summer camp 5 years in a row, you have registration forms that demonstrate, for the last 5 years, 60% of our campers are minority and 40% are low income. That would be a strong assurance. You can also provide a commitment from a partner organization who might collect similar data. So let's say you're going to serve 80% female, and you're going to achieve that by partnering with Girl Scouts USA, and Girl Scouts USA write a commitment letter that says, yes, we're going to attend all of this organization's field trips. Then that would be a strong assurance. You can use partner school data, but again, that's only if all or most of your participants are recruited through that school or that ISD. ISD data, unless you are serving 80% of students in an ISD, we're not going to accept general data like that. It must be specific and provide a strong assurance. You can also use self-reported data from participants. So if you have an online registration or even some type of registration form for summer camp or school year, after school year programs, or even campouts, if you're asking those questions on a form and your participants are self-reporting, then that would also be a good way to collect some of that demographic data. Again, we do not allow general census data. We do not allow zip code estimates. We don't allow general city or neighborhood data. And just a couple of tips, if you are proposing to serve low income as your underserved audience, You need to have a very solid and well-documented way to collect that income data. This is one of the most challenging demographics for our partners to collect, because even if they're self-reporting, a lot of folks do not want to share that information with you. A lot of partner organizations are not allowed or may not want to share that information with you. You can't assume that a school is going to serve, you can't assume that a school is going to share low-income data with you as well. So unless you have a current, verifiable, well-documented way to collect low-income data, I would highly encourage you to maybe choose to focus on a different demographic. So on the application, this section, it's very important. It's really the basis on why Co-op was founded, to reach underserved audiences. If your mission is to serve a specific population, that would justify your demographic data. Like, let's say you are an organization that specifically serves folks in wheelchairs, so individuals with a disability. We have a much stronger assurance that that is the demographic that you will reach. If you're a public organization like a day camp that's open to everybody, you will need a more documented justification for the demographics that you are proposing. So again, if you don't have a means to collect low income or disability information, please just put a 0. The goal is not to serve every single demographic category. The minimum is 40% of any one category. Very few projects would receive points for 2 or 3 categories. You will still be competitive if your majority of participants fall into just 1 or 2 demographics. So one last word about individuals with a disability. We do allow families and caretakers to count towards this demographic, because oftentimes, as many of you know, in doing outdoor programs with folks with disabilities, this requires much smaller ratios. So we do allow you to count families and caretakers in that demographic. We're going to move on to the very last section of the application, and this is all about the money. This is about your budget and program income. So on page 11, the first question on the application is about any type of income your program will receive. So it is okay to charge a small fee. We understand this can help encourage commitment and attendance from participants. It can help offset minor costs, things that the grant might not cover, like toilet paper or the heat or AC bill. If it's more than a nominal fee, be sure to provide an explanation of what the specific participant fee covers. So for an example, if an organization charges $450 per camper for a summer camp, and they're proposing in their grant application to serve 300 campers times $450 per camper, that's well over $130,000 worth of income. And so that's kind of a red flag to our grant committee to ask, hey, how is that program income already used in the grant funded program? And why would they need program dollars if they're charging an income that supports the camp? So in this section, again, it's okay to charge a nominal fee, but if it's more than that, be sure you're providing a good explanation. We do prefer grant-funded programs to be free or very low cost. We are looking at what we call ROI here, return on investment, and we score that accordingly. We do consider quality over quantity, and your project should demonstrate need. I want to stress again, we cannot fund scholarships. We can't fund anything that directly benefits one individual or payments to the direct payments to the organization itself. Our grant funds components that would be funded by scholarships. So we fund things like personnel, travel, transportation, meals, equipment, supplies. The budget itself has been somewhat simplified. There is no match or recipient contribution. Please refer to the tables in the program guidance to really understand and review what is allowed and what is disallowed under the grant expenses. It's really important to review these. If an item is disallowed, we do remove that item, and the amount from the budget is also removed, and you do not have the opportunity to replace that. So if you're asking for $100,000 and 50 of that is for a motorized vehicle, we don't allow motorized vehicles. We're not allowed to fund those vehicles. We would take that out of your budget, and then your budget would be without that $50,000. Let's look at some of the categories here. Personnel. So any personnel time that you are asking for grant funding should be directly linked to your project, should be included in that first section that we chatted about, the key personnel. We do require for reimbursement timesheets or work records for all employees. We also fund things like meals and food. Again, these are usually not restaurant. We're all about the outdoors, and we want to fund things like food for camping and different types of meals like that. Things to make sandwiches, drinks, water, that kind of thing. Transportation, again, all of these rules of what's allowable and not allowable are specifically on the table in your program guidance. So you can find out about mileage and IRS rates there. Fees, outdoor service project items, supplies and equipment. We highly recommend that you use very general line items like kayak supplies or rock climbing supplies. We don't need to list every single thing like fishing supplies like reels and line and bobbers and hooks and tackle and poles and nets. You could just say fishing supplies. That being said, please don't use anything too broad. Sometimes we see folks list just program supplies, $30,000. We simply just can't fund that. We have to have more specificity. We need a brief explanation of some of those items that you can list at the bottom. We're going to look at a sample budget together. We have a template in our resources if you need more help there. Before I show you the example, I do want to say this section can time out. It's really important you allow yourself enough time to work on your budget. We have heard a lot of feedback from grantees that out of all the parts of our application, the budget tends to take the most time. So make sure that you allot enough time, that you're saving often. I know some folks work on this offline and then input it so it doesn't time out on them. But let's look at a sample together. So remember that you can't pay fees directly to yourself. If we're looking at personnel, the only fringe benefits that we now are able to reimburse for would be that FICA cost, employer paid FICA. So not benefits or vacation time or things like that. We do need you to estimate the number of hours for your grant project. We need to see an hourly rate and then the amount of funds requested. We do often get the question, do you partially fund grants? And the answer is no. We either fund all of your eligible items or we don't give the grant award. That being said, if there's an ineligible item but everything else looks great, we may remove the ineligible item, but we don't offer partial funding for programs. Under the supply line, again, you can make this quite general. You'll see an example, fishing supplies, 50 units. You're going to estimate $67 per unit. And then in the bottom, the budget summary, you can tell us more. So that fishing supply bundle includes rods, bobbers, line, tackle, and bait at $12 per camper. Same with kayaks. A word about trailers. We do fund things like kayak trailers. These are considered equipment, and anything over a certain amount does have more specific rules for state funding. You can speak to Rena and I about that, and there's also additional information in the program guidance if you're asking for a trailer that's a significant expense. It is important that things like trailers are not bought at the end of the grant, but are actually used during the grant period to deliver programs. Again, I want to thank our special guests. I hope that you consider integrating something like Project Wild or the Texas Outdoor Family into your grant proposals. If you need assistance really trying to work that TPWD relationship into your program, please reach out to Rena or myself. We can suggest some resources that might align with your grant project and how to make sure you have a competitive application. If you have any issues trying to get a commitment letter from TPWD staff or programs, please don't wait to the last minute. We have instructed our colleagues, if we have co-op grantees asking the day before the grant is due, they are often out of office. Many of us work in the field. Many of our colleagues work in remote areas at remote parks and are not able to respond that quickly for a letter. We recommend at least 7 days, and please ask early rather than last minute. If you do have trouble contacting any of our programs or sites, reach out to us and we can help connect you to the right people. So as we wrap up today, I hope this workshop was helpful in providing you some information. We do have several in-person application workshops coming up. Next week, we are in San Antonio area. We'll also be in the Houston area, El Paso, Tyler, the Rio Grande Valley. Those in-person workshops also have opportunities for one-on-one consultations where you could meet with Rena or myself in person to discuss your application, and we can help guide you and answer any questions about your specific project. But that does require you attending an in-person workshop, which is a little more in-depth than this informational presentation today. But we do want you to start early. If you're excited right now, you can go ahead and create your Argo account and get started on that. Be sure and apply for and include your unique entity identification number. That is a required part of the application. Make sure that you have a signed and dated authorizing resolution from your organization ready to upload with your application. Be sure you have at least one eligible TPWD relationship, that you've reached out to any sites or programs or staff to verify availability and how much is it to camp out at a state park. You want to have that amount to include in your budget. Be sure to read our program guidance to ensure that the activities and budget items you're proposing are actually eligible. Plan conservatively, especially if this is your first time applying for the co-op grant. We would rather have you do a smaller, more successful program rather than shoot for the moon and then underperform. And last but not least, we want to share our contact information. We are here for guidance. We're here to help. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out directly to us and we can try and help connect you to the right folks and answer some questions. So with that, we're going to start to wrap up. We have had a lot of great questions in the live questions today. Thank you for submitting those. If there are any last minute questions, feel free to submit those now. Or again, you can just reach out directly to Rena or myself. Our emails are here and we look forward to talking with you. And we look forward to a great application to the co-op grant program for 2026. Thanks for attending.